Hari Om. In the first module of data mining and data warehousing paper, we are currently discussing the data warehousing. We have already seen what is data warehousing and what do you mean by multi-dimensional data model. In all the previous sessions, we discussed the importance of data warehouse and how multi-dimensional data model is used for representing the data in data warehouse. And the multi-dimensional data model uses data cube as its representation. In this video, we are going to talk about what are OLAP operations. Before we discuss what are OLAP operations, we'll be talking about the basic differences between OLTP and OLAP. Then we will get into the OLAP operations. So when you take data warehouses, all these data warehouses will generalize and it will consolidate the data in a multi-dimensional space, because data warehouse store the data only in the multi-dimensional data format. Now, whenever we want to have a data warehouse, it involves cleaning the data, integrating the data and transforming the data, because the raw data sources will not have same format. All the data inside the data sources, because we are going to collect the data from heterogeneous data sources. So when we collect the data from heterogeneous data sources, all the data will be in inconsistent format, different format. If so, the data need to be cleaned and it has to be integrated. Then the data must be transformed into consistent format. So before loading the data into data warehouse, it requires cleaning, integrating and transforming the data. So these steps are called as pre-processing steps for the data mining, because data mining is the tool which is used for analyzing the data. So before analyzing the data need to be collected. Where do we collect the data? We collect the data into the data warehouse. If you want to collect and load the data into data warehouse in multi-dimensional data format, we need to clean and integrate and transform the data, because the data are collected from heterogeneous data sources. So these steps are known as pre-processing step for the data mining operations. And all the data warehouse will provide OLAP tools for interactive analysis of multidimensional data of varied granularity. So based on the kind of analysis you require, we can have all these multidimensional data in the data warehouse in different granularity level. And the OLAP operations also facilitate effective data generalization and data mining. So this is the advantage of having OLAP operation. If you want to have effective data generalization and data mining, we can go for OLAP operations. And not only that, apart from analysis, the data mining includes different functions like you also call it as different techniques or different processing in the data mining: association, classification, prediction and clustering. So all these operations or all these techniques also include the OLAP operations, or I can say that all these techniques are integrated with different OLAP operations. So the data warehouse and OLAP form an essential step in the knowledge discovery process, because data mining we are doing to extract some pattern or some kind of knowledge from the hidden data. Where do we have the hidden data? We have the hidden data in the data warehouse. So between the data warehouse and the data mining tool, we have one engine called as OLAP server engine. So before we get into the different operations, let us see what are the basic difference between OLTP and OLAP system. Online transaction processing system, online analytical processing system. The online transactional processing systems are online operational database systems. These are used to perform online transaction and query processing. And these are the things, these are the operations, or I can say these are the systems that cover most of the day-to-day operations of an organization. For example, if you want to have the accounting, if you want to have the banking, day-to-day banking, manufacturing or payroll, or the kind of accounting, purchasing, inventory, all these things, if you have the daily tasks to be recorded, for which I can use the OLTP systems. Whereas if you take OLAP systems, these are the systems that serve users or knowledge workers in the role of data analysis and decision making. So that is the main difference between OLAP and OLTP. OLTP is used for the transaction and query processing. So the daily transactions will be recorded by the OLTP systems. Whereas if you want to do the data analysis and decision making, we will be using the online analytical processing system. And these systems can organize and present the data in very different formats to accommodate the diverse needs of the different users. Now, what do you mean by diverse needs of the different users? Because when we do the data analysis, the analysis is to be done by various users. Say for example, right from the manager level to the executive level, or to the president or to the CEO, you want to do the analysis. So for the diverse needs of different users, what are the different analysis available, or what are the different analysis required? For all these things, the OLAP systems will organize and present the data in different formats. So it can be in the text format, it can be in the graphical representation, it may be in a graph mode, or it may be in the image. So different kinds of formats will be available to present the data, which can be used for data analysis and decision making. So this is the basic difference between OLTP and OLAP. So OLTP is transactional processing system, which will be used for entering the daily transactions, whereas OLAP is mainly used for data analysis and decision making. So it needs to present the data in different formats, because there are different kinds of users who want to do the data analysis. So when you take the OLAP, it is generally used for exploring and analyzing the data in the data warehouse. And these OLAP systems will access the live data that is available in the data warehouse. And it is capable of analyzing very large database, because your data warehouse is going to contain a huge amount of data. It is going to contain historical data. So obviously the OLAP must be capable of analyzing large database, and it must also have interactive data analysis. And not only that, the OLAP is a user-friendly environment for the interactive data. And if you want to do the OLAP operations, I need a separate server for OLAP operations, and this server is also known as OLAP engine. And this OLAP engine or OLAP server is completely based on the multidimensional data model, because it is going to work only on the multidimensional data model. And this server will allow the managers or the analysts to get an insight of the information, and not only that, it gives you fast and consistent. This is very, very important, because your data warehouse is going to store the historical data in a consistent format. Because though it is going to collect the data from heterogeneous data sources and in different formats, it is capable of storing the data in a consistent format. So all your data warehouses is going to have consistent format. So obviously your OLAP server will give fast and consistent information. And not only that, it provides interactive access to the information also, because all the reporting tools or your data mining tools, everything will be accessing the data in a different format. But though it is accessing the data in different format, it will be collected into consistent format. Then it is going to use the interactive access for different information. So if this is the case, let us understand what is the difference between OLAP and OLTP based on different criteria. So based on users and system orientation, your OLTP system is customer oriented and it is used for transaction and query processing. So it will be generally used by clerks, clients, all the data entry operators, the accountants, and all the employees who are dealing with day-to-day transactions will be using the OLTP system. Whereas OLAP system is market oriented, because you are going to do some kind of analysis to improve the business performance. So obviously it is market oriented and it is used for data analysis as already told, and it is generally used by the knowledge workers. So some knowledge workers, when I say knowledge workers in an organization, it will start from the managers, executives and analysts, because these are the people who will be involved in developing the business functions or modifying the business functions, and they are the people who will be involved in upgrading the business performance. So those people will be using the OLAP system. Now based on the data contents, what kind of data will be stored in OLTP and OLAP? So your OLTP will be generally managing the current data, because it is dealing with the daily transaction. So obviously it has to store the current data, and that are too detailed to be easily used for decision making. Because when you do the daily transactions, say for example, if it is going to be a supermarket, in the daily transaction, you have to enter the customer detail, you have to enter each item, you have to enter the price of each item, you have to enter the quantity of each item, then the date, the time, whether the cash is paid, whether it is paid through the credit card or debit card. So all these kind of the detailed information about one transaction will be managed by the OLTP system, whereas OLAP system is not going for this kind of detailing. Instead, it is going to manage the historical data. So when I say historical data, it is going to provide facilities for summarization. We have already seen in your multidimensional data model, we are going to have always a summary measure based on summary function. So summarization, aggregation, and stores and manages information at different levels of granularity. And these features make the data easier to use in informed decision making. So this is another difference. Here it is managing the current data in a detailed manner, whereas here it deals with historical data, but it is not going to have the detailing. Instead, it is going to have the summary or the aggregation. Now, based on the database design, OLTP prefers always a ER data model, entity relationship data model, and it is application oriented database design. So, which application is using the database, based on the database design will be changed. Whereas OLAP system adapts or it typically adopts oriented database design. So when I say it adopts the database design, the database design will be generally the multidimensional data model. It is oriented towards what kind of analysis you are going to do. Accordingly, you collect the data and you are going to store it in the data warehouse. So it must use only a multi-dimensional data model. OLAP will be using multi-dimensional data model. Based on the view, the OLTP system focuses mainly on the current data within an enterprise or department, and it is not going to refer any historical data or any kind of data in different organizations. So it is the duty of OLTP is just what transaction happened at this particular moment that will be entered, right? Or that kind of transactions need to be queried. That is what is done by the OLTP system. So the OLTP system will be viewing the data in the form of transactions, and the transactions will be in detail. Whereas OLAP system spans multiple versions of the database schema, because it is going to use evolutionary process of an organization. Why? Because it is going to have the historical data. For example, what happens in the last 5 years, what happens in the last 10 years, right from the implementation of the business, what happened, right from the installation of that particular business, what happened. That is what is stored in the OLAP system. So it will be spanning around multiple versions of the database schema, because one branch may be using a different database schema, another branch will be using another database schema, and maybe in before 5 years the organization might have used a different database schema and different database design. So after 5 years the organization is going to use a different database design. So the OLAP system must deal with information that originates from different organizations, and it has to be integrating the information from many different data stores. So because of their huge volume, OLAP data are stored on multiple storage media, right? Because it is going to deal with historical data. Based on the access pattern, the OLTP system consists mainly of short and atomic transactions, because only one transaction at a time. And such a system requires concurrency control and recovery mechanism, because more than one organization or more than one branch may be accessing the same data. So you need the concurrency control, because one will be, say for example, if you take IRCTC, when you take the IRCTC booking, train ticket booking happens. So booking the train tickets for each and every passenger becomes a transaction, right? So when one passenger is booking a ticket, obviously the data need to be updated. So by the time another passenger may be retrieving the data to know how many tickets are available for a particular trip, right? So that kind of concurrency control and recovery mechanism is required for the OLTP system. So you might have studied in your database PSQL like the commit and rollback, right? So the commit and rollback are all used for the concurrency control. And we have also seen the asset property, transaction management. So all these things are required for the OLTP system, whereas OLAP system does not require this kind of concurrency control, because the data is going to be read-only data. So once the historical data is loaded into the data warehouse, no application is allowed to modify the data. You can load the data and you can refresh the data, but you cannot modify the data. So that kind of access pattern. So it becomes read only, whereas here it is going to be read write. Okay. So based on users, data contents, database design, view and access pattern, this is how an OLAP and OLTP system will be differing. So this is another tabular representation of what are the differences between OLTP and OLAP. So based on the characteristics, the OLTP is operational processing, whereas OLAP is informational processing. Of course, I have collected this table from the internet. When you browse through, you may be getting the same table. Based on the orientation, OLTP is used for transaction processing, whereas it is used for analysis. And based on the user, the OLTP will be used at this level, right? All the database professionals, clerks, database administrators, they will be using the transaction processing, whereas analytical processing will be used by knowledge workers, something like manager, executive, analyst, someone like managers, executives and analysts. And based on the function, OLTP is having day-to-day operations, whereas it is long-term informational requirements and it is mainly used for decision support. And based on the database design, it is going to use ER model, it is application oriented, whereas OLAP will be using star schema or snowflake schema. We will be discussing what do you mean by star schema and snowflake schema. These are the schema that are used for the data warehouse. And data warehouse is not application oriented, it is subject oriented. You will have a particular theme for designing the data warehouse, whereas here it is based on the application. So what application you are using, based on that you will be designing the database. And here based on the data, the OLTP will be always having the up-to-date data or current data, whereas OLAP is using historical data and the accuracy will be maintained over time. So when you have only 1 year data, 2 years data, your analysis may not give you the accurate result, right? Whereas if you have 10 years or 20 years data, the analysis will give you the accurate result. So that is why it says accuracy is maintained over time. Right? So when you have large amount of data, your analysis is going to give you the correct result. Then based on the summarization, the OLTP can give you only a primitive or highly detailed data, whereas OLAP can give summarized and consolidated data. So here it is going to be very primitive level, but here it is going to be a summary and consolidated data. And based on the view, obviously the OLTP will be having a detailed view and it is going to be flat and relational data. Whereas here it is going to be multi-dimensional data view, or the data cube view will be used here, and it is going to have summarized data. And in the unit of work, OLTP is having a very short query, very short SQL queries will be used, and it is generally used for simple transaction. You just store a data and you retrieve a data. Whereas OLAP is going to have a very complex query. And accessing, we have seen already, OLTP will have read and write access, whereas OLAP will be having read access. And the focus here, OLTP will be focusing on the data in, right? So what are the data being stored into the database? That is what the focus is. But here, what kind of information can be retrieved? That is the focus here, right? So what is the data you are going to store into the database? That becomes the focus of OLTP. But here, what kind of information or pattern that I am going to retrieve from the data. That is what is the focus of OLAP system. Then based on the operations, obviously it is going to have indexed or hash based, which will be completely based on the primary key. But here it is going to have multiple scanning. We'll be discussing in the data mining how many number of scans are required for doing each operation. Right, so you need to scan the entire data many times for the analysis purpose. And the number of records accessed for the OLTP system, it is generally in tens, but in OLAP it is going to be lakhs and lakhs of records. And the number of users, many users will be here in the OLTP, but here we are going to have very few users because it is going to be used only in the executive level. So we have seen in the pyramid, the transactional processing systems are at the bottom of the pyramid, and the knowledge, or you call it as executive systems, are in the top of the pyramid. So in the bottom level, many users will be there for the transactional processing, whereas in the top level of the pyramid of any organization, only few users will be there for the executive systems or for decision making. Then the database size will be generally in 100 MBs to gigabytes, whereas transaction for the analytical processing, it is going to be ranging from 100 GB to terabyte. And the priority for the transaction processing, high performance is the priority, because you need to have the transaction processing done in a very highly available database, and it has to give you good performance also. But OLAP, it is going to have the priority given for the flexibility, how flexible your analysis can be. So I have one set of data, I want to do analysis 1, using the same data whether I can do analysis 2 also. So this kind of flexibility must be there for the analytical processing. And it is obviously end user autonomy. So right, who wants to do the analysis, whether manager wants to do the analysis, or the executive wants to do the analysis, or the MD wants to do the analysis. So based on that, the data storage will be differing. So that is how the priority will be given. So in the analytical processing, the priority will be based on the user, right, who is performing the analysis. But here it is based on the availability of the data. And the metric here, it is the transaction throughput. How many transactions are done per second? How many transactions are stored per second? So that is what is the metric used for the online transaction processing system. But here it is going to be the response time and the query throughput. So how many queries are executed per second, or what is the response time? Because you are going to scan nearly lakhs and lakhs of records. So if this is the case, the query throughput and the response time becomes a metric for online analytical processing systems, right? So this is the basic difference between transaction processing and the analytical processing. In the next video, we'll be talking about what are the different OLAP operations. Thank you.